What comes to mind when you hear the name Chanel? Luxury, sophistication, that iconic tweed suit, or maybe that famous No. 5 perfume that literally everyone recognizes. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. The woman behind this empire had one of the most scandalous, dramatic, and controversial lives you could ever imagine. I'm here to tell you the real story of Gabrielle Chanel, and trust me, it's way more fascinating than any Netflix series. We're talking betrayal, love affairs, Nazi connections, business battles, and a rise from absolute poverty to becoming one of the richest women in the world. So buckle up, because this story has everything. Picture this. It's 1883, and a baby girl is born into absolute poverty in a tiny town called Saumur. Her name? Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel. Her father was a struggling salesman who could barely keep food on the table. And luxury? That was something she could only dream about while watching the wealthy elite of the Belle Epoque live their extravagant lives. But here's the thing about Gabrielle. She had this incredible ability to turn every setback into a comeback. This woman could take the worst situation and somehow transform it into an opportunity. And she was going to need that skill because life was about to test her brutally. When she was just 11 years old, tragedy struck like lightning. Her mother died, and her father, unable or unwilling to care for his children, basically abandoned her at an orphanage in Aubazine. Can you imagine being 11 years old and losing everything? Your mother, your father, your home, your entire world just disappears overnight? But instead of letting this destroy her, Gabrielle used it as fuel for an inner fire that would burn for the rest of her life. At that orphanage, she learned to read, write, and most importantly, to sew. The nuns taught her needlework, and little did anyone know, this was the beginning of a fashion revolution that would change how women dressed forever. Fast forward to when she's 18. Gabrielle leaves the orphanage and moves to Moulins, this town packed with military officers because of its headquarters. She starts working as a seamstress in a tailor's shop. And here's where it gets really interesting. She begins studying men's clothing with almost obsessive fascination. Why was she so drawn to menswear? Because men's clothing represented everything she craved: freedom, comfort, practicality. Women at this time were literally trapped in corsets and layers of petticoats that made simple movement a challenge. But men? They could move, work, live freely. This fascination with menswear would completely revolutionize women's fashion forever. Gabrielle was incredibly ambitious. Her biggest dream wasn't fame or fortune, it was independence. And in the early 1900s, that was absolutely revolutionary thinking for a woman. She understood something that most women didn't. To be truly free, she needed financial independence. She couldn't depend on any man for her survival. So what does she do? She decides to try becoming a singer. Now, she wasn't exactly the next Edith Piaf, but she did get a nickname that would stick forever: Coco. She used to perform at cafe concerts, singing this song called Qui qu'a vu Coco. And boom, Coco Chanel was born. Her singing career completely flopped, but that nickname, that was pure marketing gold. Here's where her story takes its first dramatic turn. At one of these cafe concerts, she meets Étienne Balsan, a wealthy French aristocrat and officer who's basically swimming in money. And yes, she becomes his mistress, moving into his chateau and living as what they called an irregular, essentially a kept woman. But Coco knew this arrangement had an expiration date. She wasn't naive about her situation. However, instead of trying to blend in with high society like most mistresses would, she decided to do something completely audacious. She chose to stand out dramatically. She starts mixing men's clothing with women's wear, creating these outfits that absolutely shocked everyone at social gathering. Picture this: all the other women are wearing elaborate gowns with corsets, And here comes Coco in something simple, comfortable, with masculine elements. People were staring, gossiping, talking about her constantly. But here's the brilliant part. People weren't talking about her because she was Balsan's girlfriend. They were talking about her because of her incredible, unique style. This is when Coco starts building her personal brand, decades before anyone knew what personal branding meant. She remembers how her mother's family taught her to make hats during summer visits, and she turns this skill into her first real business opportunity. With financial help from Balsan and her new lover Arthur Capel, yes, she upgraded to someone who actually loved her. She opens her first hat shop at 21 Rue Cambon in Paris. She's 27 and already making serious waves. Arthur Capel wasn't just any lover. He was the love of her life. Rich, handsome, and genuinely caring, he believed in her talent and invested in her dreams. When World War I approaches, Coco and Arthur escape to the glamorous seaside resort of Deauville, and this becomes one of the happiest periods of her entire life. She actually believes in love and thinks this relationship could last forever. During this magical period, something incredible happens for fashion history. Parisian high society flocks south to escape the war, and Coco starts experimenting with affordable materials and comfortable clothing. She's watching these wealthy women struggle in restrictive clothing at the beach and thinking, this is insane. So she creates sportswear that's actually practical. By 1913, she's opening boutiques everywhere. Deauville, Cannes, Biarritz. Her sportswear collections become incredibly popular. And by 1917, Harper's Bazaar reports that Chanel mode is on the list for every fashionable woman. When the war ends in 1918, she returns to Paris with a clear mission. She opens the legendary Chanel boutique at 31 Rue Cambon, the exact same address where Chanel operates today. And here's the ultimate power move. She pays off all her investors and achieves her greatest goal: complete independence. What made Chanel so successful during wartime? She understood exactly what women needed. In 1913, she launches her first suit using jersey fabric, a material mainly used for men's underwear. But with textile shortages from the war, she transformed this affordable, comfortable fabric into luxury designer clothing. This suit wasn't just successful with customers. Fashion critics went crazy for it. This was the defining moment when Chanel established what her brand would represent: effortless chic through simplicity, comfort meeting function and beauty, mixing masculine and feminine elements in revolutionary ways. Then comes the roaring 1920s, and Coco absolutely reigns supreme. She reinvents her suit in knitwear and creates her most iconic piece, the little black dress, in 1926. Before Chanel, black was strictly for mourning and servant. This color was literally forbidden for fashionable women. She took this forbidden color and made it the ultimate symbol of chic sophistication. At first, people were genuinely shocked. But then women realized how incredibly liberating it was. Coco was definitely the coolest woman of the 1920s. By the 1930s, Chanel becomes a household name. Her couture business is booming, and she establishes her legendary color palette: black to accentuate the essential, white to illuminate, beige for warmth, gold for luxury, and red as the color of life itself. But here's where Coco gets really smart about building wealth. In 1921, she meets Ernest Beau, a brilliant Russian perfumer, and commissions something revolutionary: a synthetic perfume made from 80 different scents. The result? Chanel No. 5, destined to become the most famous perfume in history. 2 years later, she wants wider distribution, so she makes a deal with Pierre Wertheimer: 70% for him, 20% for galleries, and only 10% for Chanel. Worst business deal ever? It makes her incredibly wealthy, but haunts her forever because she loses independence over her most profitable creation. Then World War II happens, and everything gets incredibly complicated. Chanel closes her boutiques but stays in occupied Paris, living at the Ritz Hotel. The hotel is taken over by Nazi officers, and she's literally living among them. Here's the most controversial part. She begins a relationship with Nazi officer Hans Gunther von Dinklage, who's 15 years younger. Many believe she was trying to use this relationship to reclaim her perfume business from the Wertheimers, who were Jewish. But Pierre was smarter. He transferred his businesses to a Catholic friend, so Coco's plan backfired completely. Meanwhile, let's talk about the heartbreak that shaped her forever. Arthur Capel, the love of her life, married an English aristocrat in 1918, relegating Chanel to mistress status. 1 year later, he died in a car crash, crushing all her dreams of love and marriage. This devastation explains her later choices. She never married, choosing instead to live completely freely.
When the war ends, France never forgives her Nazi connections. She leaves Paris, retires from fashion, and goes into exile in Switzerland, watching the fashion world move on without her. But here's the incredible second act. In 1947, Christian Dior launches his new look, tiny waists and full skirts, the complete opposite of everything Coco fought for. She sees this return to restrictive clothing and cannot let it stand. At age 70, she ends her exile and reignites her career. The French hate her comeback. They still see her as a traitor, but American press absolutely loves her return. In 1954, she launches her most iconic creation, the tweed suit, inspired by her time with the Duke of Westminster. It's the total opposite of Dior's restrictive look, straight cut, allowing complete freedom of movement, practical for any occasion. She also perfects her legendary accessories, the quilted 2.55 shoulder bag with its revolutionary chain strap, named after its February 1955 launch date. This bag literally frees women's hands, and those iconic two-tone shoes, designed to make feet look smaller through optical illusion. Despite incredible success, she's still obsessed with getting her perfume business back. She sues Wertheimer for $9 million, but eventually settles for $25 million a year. Gabrielle Chanel dies in 1971 at age 88, still working and creating until the very end. Today, the Wertheimer family still owns Chanel, making it one of the most successful fashion houses ever. What makes Chanel's story so incredible? She didn't just leave us fashion, she left us an attitude about independence, style, and never letting anyone put you in a box. What do you think about Coco's scandalous life? Was she a visionary genius, a calculated survivor, or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories.